We have joining us online from Ramallah, occupied Palestine, Saleh Hijazi. He is the Deputy Regional Director of MENA, which is the Middle East and North Africa Division of Amnesty International. He is a researcher and an analyst with degrees in human rights and philosophy, and he's author of the report just published in February this year, 2022, by Amnesty International, Israel's Apartheid Against Palestinians, a cruel system of domination and a crime against humanity. Saleh Hijazi, please, you have the floor, and a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Jaap. Thank you, Omar, and everyone in attendance. Can't see you all, but hello. A quick note, I'm not the only author of the report. There was a large team that worked on this 280-page report. I wanted to begin with this. On the 23rd of February of this year, 13-year-old Muhammad Saleh was killed by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank. He was at that time the second child to be killed by Israeli forces since the beginning of 2022. Last year, 2021, Israeli forces killed 76 Palestinian children. The day before Muhammad was killed, Israeli authorities demolished homes of Palestinians in Al-Araqib village in the Naqab area for the 198th time. 2,568 residential and livelihood structures belonging to Palestinians were demolished by the Israeli forces in Al-Naqab in 2020. More than 150 Palestinians are currently under threat of losing their homes because of demolition orders or forced evictions. This year, a law that prevents Palestinians married to Palestinian citizens of Israel or residents of Israel was passed to prevent those families from living together in Israel or occupied East Jerusalem. The law, which was a temporary law between 2003 and 2021, continues a long-standing policy of separating Palestinian families, affecting thousands of Palestinians. In January, Amal Nakhli turned 18 in administrative detention, which is detention without charge of trial. He was held since January 2021. He suffers from a neuromuscular disorder. An average of 2 Palestinian children are held in administrative detention, again, detention without charge of trial, by the Israeli authorities each month. The same month, in January, 80-year-old Omar Asad was found dead with his hands cuffed in his village of Jaljilia in the West Bank, after he was detained by Israeli forces during a night raid on his village. These are just some of the human rights violations perpetrated by Israeli authorities against Palestinians since the beginning of this year, 2020. What they have in common is that they form a small part of a picture of a pattern of violations that we've seen since the beginning of the year. They express cruelty. Children are at the heart of these patterns of violations, and they were carried out with impunity. But most importantly, they are all symptoms of something structural and deeply rooted. That is Israel's apartheid against Palestinians, a cruel system of domination and a crime against humanity. This is the title of Amnesty International's report that was published earlier this year on the 1st of February. The report finds that since its establishment in 1948, Israel has pursued a policy of establishing and maintaining a Jewish demographic hegemony and maximizing its control over land to benefit Jewish Israelis while restricting the rights of Palestinians and preventing Palestinian refugees from returning to their homes. In 1967, Israel extended this policy to the West Bank and Gaza Strip, which it has occupied ever since. In the report, we at Amnesty have analyzed Israel's intent to create and maintain a system of oppression and domination over Palestinians and examined its key components, which are territorial fragmentation, segregation and control, dispossession of land and property, and denial of economic and social rights. The report concludes that this system amounts to apartheid. The report also presents documentation of unlawful acts committed by Israel against Palestinians with the intent to maintain this system, including forcible transfers, administrative detention and torture, unlawful killings, and the denial of basic rights and freedoms and persecution. We conclude in the report that such acts form part of a systematic as well as widespread attack directed against the Palestinian population and amount to the crime against humanity of apartheid. The main call in the report is for Israel to dismantle this cruel system and the international community to pressure it to do so. We call on all those with jurisdiction over the crimes committed to maintain the system to investigate them. Now, there was a question about Amnesty's, the timing of Amnesty's report, and I can say more about that, but what I want to say, the important thing about the Amnesty report, one, it is not the first one, of course. It follows the pioneering work of Palestinian organizations, human rights defenders, academics, and scholars who have been using this discourse, legal framework of analysis, and producing knowledge on Israel's apartheid against Palestinians for decades. What the Amnesty report does is it provides extensive documentation and legal analysis of the patterns of crimes and human rights violations perpetrated by Israel in the framework of the crime against humanity and the human rights violation of apartheid. With the publication of this report, and as Omar was referring to, the consensus, a circle of consensus has now been completed at the level of civil society organizations, human rights organizations working on the situation in Israel and Palestine. And we've seen yesterday this consensus grow with, as Omar was saying, the special rapporteur on the human rights situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, Professor Michael Ling, also making the determination that Israel is perpetrating the crime against humanity of apartheid against Palestinians. What is also important about it is that it comes as a response to Palestinian action on the ground to defy Israel's system of oppression and domination. This consensus and the support of Palestinians must now be widened, and countries must now live up to their moral and legal responsibility to dismantle Israel's apartheid against Palestinians and bring those responsible to justice. The report includes more than 7 pages of recommendations, including to governments around the world, the United Nations and its bodies, including the International Criminal Court, for example, to include an investigation into the crime against humanity of apartheid in the open investigation by the Office of the Prosecutor into the situation in the occupied Palestinian territories, as well as recommendations to businesses not to be complicit in the perpetrating of the crime against humanity of apartheid. Those recommendations provide for a solid basis for bringing the system down and putting an end to the crime against humanity. But it all starts with something very important, and that is recognition. Recognizing the situation for what it is, that of a cruel system of domination and a crime against humanity. Apartheid should have no place in our world today, and we all have a responsibility to act together against it. This is why solidarity is so important. This is why action everywhere, in the global north, in the global south, in solidarity with Palestinians, on pressuring governments, parliamentarians, businesses, and others, is really crucial. All this work linked together is what's going to bring this system, Israel's apartheid, down. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saleh Hijazi. So anti-Semitism is an issue of great concern to all of us involved in social justice issues. Anti-Semitism is frequently mentioned in relation to this topic, usually in quite misleading and even dangerous ways. To help us understand this dimension better, we have as our second panelist, Jaap Hamburger. Jaap Hamburger is chair of A Different Jewish Voice in Ander Joods Geluid, established in 2001 with others, including the late Dr. Hayo Meyer, a theoretical physicist, Palestine campaigner, and an Auschwitz survivor. The organization was established in order to promote public debate regarding Israel and is based in Amsterdam. Jaap Hamburger, you're warmly welcome.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Omar. I prepared a paper, but listening to what others have said, I think I will keep it short and simple, trying to say something that not yet has been said. For example, I prepared a comparison between South African apartheid and Israeli apartheid. And I think we shouldn't focus too much on South African apartheid, but on the crime of apartheid, because the differences between South African apartheid and Israeli apartheid are too big to not to mention. Saying something about that, anyhow. My anxiety is that because South African apartheid in the end failed, people might be seduced to think that Israeli apartheid will fail the same way. And I don't think that is realistic. Historic struggle against South African apartheid contains outdated and limited lessons for contemporary Palestinian resistance. It was less sophisticated than Israeli apartheid. It had to deal with organized armed resistance. It was internationally outlawed with little to no outspoken political support, and it was brought to an end by these and other factors that are absent in Palestine. So no illusions. Israeli apartheid will not end the glorious way South African apartheid did. So therefore, better focus upon the crime of apartheid as defined by international law and not upon the historic process of South African apartheid. Stigmatize Israel as posing as a democratic state while practicing oppression and military dictatorship over occupied Palestinians. Keep stressing towards our own government that Israel is a disgrace in this family of so-called democratic nations. Stress the following simple truths over and over again. Democracy and the rule of law are 24/7 incompatible with occupation. I leave out a few things, and I turn to the use of misleading terminology. We often hear, and I did it in the past as well, totally innocent, speaking about the Jewish state. But there is no such a thing as a Jewish state. First of all, of course, because population of this state is not comprised only of Jews, but that's not the main reason. The main reason is, first of all, maybe Israel is a predominantly Jewish society, although I would rather call it a predominantly Zionist society, but it's definitely not a Jewish state. A state is a state, independent from its ethnicity of its inhabitants. The reason it's called a Jewish state is simple. Criticizing the Jewish state means criticizing Jews, and that's anti-Semitism. So calling Israel a Jewish state is a first defensive line against any criticism. Apart, I cannot escape the word, apart from that, Jewishness is not monolithical, but a multifaceted. So what exactly does it mean here, Jewish, in Jewish state? Second term, the right to exist. Criticizing Israel means doubting its right to exist. But there is no such a thing for a state as a right to exist. A state exists or it does not exist. That's a matter of fact. But nowhere is laid down a right of existence. This notion, too, serves only one end, the same as before, to safeguard Israel from criticism. The idea again is criticizing Israel means throwing doubts upon its rights of existence, and that is, surprise, surprise, anti-Semitism. So regard again this favorite of the Israel lobby. Spreading doubts on the right of existence of the Jewish state amounts to anti-Semitism. completely false statement. There is a third concept, and Omar touched upon it already, that serves to defend the way Israel behaves. That's called here in the Netherlands and elsewhere Judeo-Christian culture, or even Judeo-Christian civilization as a hallmark of Europe. Israel fighting for us to defend this culture against the barbarians before the gates. Here, it's sufficient to remind you of these triumphs of Judeo-Christian civilization, 19th century colonialism, and 20th century fascism and Nazism. Let's abolish this idea of superior Judeo-Christian civilization. Let's abolish it, not tomorrow, but today. Well, I think these are the main points. There is one more thing that maybe I should mention, although a person critical of what I had written said to me that I do represent it wrong. That's, in my view, the problem posed by the concept of intersectionalism. You spoke about it, Omar. For me, but I might be wrong. And I appreciate your comments. For me, recognition of intersectionalism is that at a very high level of abstraction, all struggles have the same roots and are all about the same cause. Forgive me, or don't forgive me, but I regard this as utter nonsense, losing sight of the specific characteristics of each cause. There might be some overlap every now and then, but don't equate Black Lives Matter to house demolitions in Palestine, or the transgender calls to bombing Gaza. It will lead us nowhere. And that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Students have been at the forefront of discussion on this issue. They are the principal organizers of Israeli Apartheid Week, which several academics among the several hundred who signed a petition have been supporting. The second panelist we have there is therefore Donna Abuelda. She is a law student at Maastricht University, and she's a board member of the student-led organization Free Palestine Maastricht, which has been struggling to secure a university space for discussions on Palestine and countering efforts to demonize the group. They eventually did succeed, it has to be said, and that's really to your tremendous credit and persistence. A warm welcome to you, Donna. You have the floor.
So hello everyone, and really truly thank you, Omar and Jaap, for your contributions and the coming ones, and Saleh as well. I'm really, really grateful to be here, and knowing that I'm with the people that I'm with right now, I was wondering what I could bring to the conversation and really contemplating what I could perhaps add, and I hope you can indulge me. And it's truly inspiring of hope and joy to be reminded of the growth of the movement that has been happening recently. Okay, I'm really sorry. Can you hear me now? All right. So yeah, I'm just reiterating how truly inspiring of hope and joy it has been to see the growth of the movement the past couple of the recent period, especially the past couple of weeks with the situation with the students in Leiden, and also what we're trying to do in Maastricht, despite the many recent attacks, smear campaigns, silencing attempts, and repressions by Dutch fascist institutes. We try to remain strong and resilient together. So I am Palestinian from Gaza, and I do not get to meet many Palestinians, let alone from Gaza, on the outside. So unfortunately, we don't usually get to hear the lived Gazan experience. My family left many years ago when they could, and my first time back in 10 years was a couple of months ago. And I could tell you about counting the number of checkpoints with a pen on my hand, because phones were not allowed to be used to document the violating journey, the heinous strip. And I counted 16 checkpoints to be able to get to the Gazan border. I could also perhaps talk to you about the state of 2.3 million people of of Gaza that live on an unlivable piece of land, less than 400 meters squared. How they live, how they persevere, how they resist, how they practice hope as well, despite all else. We could also speak of the cries and the mourning of every Gazan, every Palestinian around the world for the past 74 years, while we continue to make our case for why we should be still treated as full human. Ever since, the Palestinians continue to fight on all fronts to realize their rights, and many of those means are illegal. So I thought it was only appropriate, since I have a bit of legal background, to speak about the recent perhaps advancements in the legal field or in the legal sphere regarding the Palestinian cause. So especially being with the Peace HR the past couple of months, I got to learn a lot about the legal implications surrounding the Palestinian struggle and vis-a-vis their work, also on the legal submissions to the ICC, as well as the rise of human rights organizations that are acknowledging the grave injustices committed against the Palestinian people, finally. Western ones, because non-Western ones have been saying it for decades. So we speak of the various violations of international human rights law, where the prohibition of institutionalized discrimination, especially on grounds of race and ethnicity, constitute one of the fundamental elements of international law. Most states have agreed to treat the worst forms of such discrimination, that is persecution and apartheid, as crimes against humanity, and have given the ICC the power to prosecute these crimes when national authorities are unable or unwilling to pursue them. So crimes against humanity constitute specific criminal acts committed as part of a widespread or systemic attack, or acts committed pursuant to a state or organizational policy directed against a civilian population, which we can also very much see. I think most of you are quite, at least minimally familiar with the Palestinian situation, the news, and most attacks are directed against civilians, demolitions, disposition, murders, killings, detention, and so forth. So the Apartheid Convention, for example, because I was thinking perhaps also we can talk about the Amnesty report and so on, because our colleague was here as well. And just briefly, it also defines crimes against humanity of apartheid as inhumane acts committed for the purpose of establishing and maintaining domination by one racial group over a group of persons over any other racial group of persons, and systemically oppressing them. The Rome Statute of the ICC also adopted similar definition as well. And the crime of apartheid under Apartheid Convention and the Rome Statute consists of three primary elements, and I could also get into them. But we have finally reached a conclusion where the biggest human rights organizations around the world can agree that Palestine, or the situation in Palestine, is apartheid. And so additional to those as well, we can talk about forcible transfer, expropriation of land, property, creation of separate reserves and ghettos, and the denial of the right to leave and to return to the country, and the right to a nationality, which are all rights that the Palestinian people struggle with and have been advocating for decades as well, where the right of return also remains crucial, especially for the Palestinians in diaspora. We can also speak of the approximately 2 million dunams of land that are illegally confiscated from the West Bank alone. And we can speak of the heinous exodus, the illegal detentions, the murders, the disposition, and the injustices, all grave violations of the law. We can also speak of how the ICC finally accepted jurisdiction over the injustices committed against us, and finally, we have been acknowledged by the also righteous international human rights organizations for the violations that have been committed against us for decades already. So maybe, I don't know, perhaps we should say yay. And it's really great, it's absolutely great that such growth has been happening within the legal sphere. And I'm also a law student, so we should, I think, at least for me, I always feel like, okay, this is great, this is good, this is growth. But I personally refuse, and I implore you as well, to not succumb to the idea of appealing to the moral compass of inherently racist, fascist, and classist structures of the law and other political institutions. The law is merely a means, a stagnant one even. We shall not be concerned with what Western imperial institutes have to say about our people's struggles, especially for the Palestinian cause, as the very dismay that we are in from violations of international law and human rights law are a direct result of Western imperialism. They're not violations despite of it, but they are by Western by Western civilization, by the Western world, and they are perpetuated and upheld by the very systems that they created to remedy those violations. The liberal West, with the case of Palestine, continues to taint the struggle of the Palestinian people with claims of complexity, amongst many other fallacious arguments that dehumanize the Palestinian people. And I think we all must have heard this, oh, it's too complicated argument so many times. But such appeals to complexity, and they arise again, especially when you talk about apartheid, especially with apartheid, because people continue to sort of draw parallels, like Jaap mentioned, to South African apartheid. It's a very, very different situation. But at the same time, we should not put the Palestinian cause in a special box where there are all the exceptions of the world to make sure to, or to continue to allow Israel to do what it's doing. So those appeals to complexity have been historically employed in an attempt to defend the indefensible. And this organization serves to make the Palestinian exceptional, meaning that our normal judgment or morality goes out of the window, or that they do not apply here due to those special circumstances. Normally, whenever we hear of refugees or the right of refugee to return, it's a default for us, it's a given. A refugee should be able to return to their country. But in the case of Palestine, these are special refugees. So it's a special case, it's an exceptional case where it's still debated, it's still complex. We can't tell where we stand on it morally or legally or politically or whatever. So yeah, we shall reiterate this, and I think it's just important to highlight again. But the last paradox is that the tale of Palestine from the beginning until today, and that's Elon Papi that says this, is a simple story of colonialism and dispossession. Yet the world treats it as a multifaceted and complex story, hard to understand and even harder to solve. Israel succeeded with the help of its allies everywhere, all over the West, in building a multi-layered explanation that is so complex that only Israel could understand it. Any interference from the outside world is immediately castigated as naive, or at best, naive at best, anti-Semitic at worst, where the latter is a tactic of weaponizing and racializing religion that has been historically used by colonial powers against the oppressed people. And when we speak of oppressed people, I think it's, and I'm concluding soon, we should always reiterate the importance of seeing the Palestinian struggle as a cause against racism, fascism, Zionism, imperialism, colonialism, anti-Semitism, and apartheid. It is also our most important reminder that decolonization and tearing down the structures of apartheid is not abstract theory, nor case files behind closed chambers, nor legal material that you need to fulfill the definition of. It is material, it is violent, it is also psychologically destructive. It is not popular, it will be debated by the entirety of the monstrous colonial Western world, but it must be done. It is a call to use every means necessary, every front, every door, every discipline to convey the voices of the Palestinian people and the voice of Palestinian solidarity. Through student organizations, raising awareness, protesting, and pushing every institution that you're part of, everywhere that you can be heard, to refuse to be complicit. This must be emphasized and reiterated to open doors to genuine and strong solidarity between us and between different movements, beyond the law, beyond identity politics, beyond the starless nights of war, beyond borders, beyond nations. And this is also something that we do when we think of liberation. We think within the framework of nation states. We need to go outside borders. When we talk about liberation, it's for all the people, all the land. We appeal to the people to unite as one, not for you to sympathize with the Palestinian people alone, nor for our comrades to despair, but to practice solidarity as one people on one land, that being the wholeness of the earth. For every olive tree that is killed, we revolt. For every human that is hurt, we revolt. When one weeps, we all weep. When one triumphs, we all triumph. And that, I think, is the essence, in my opinion, of the Palestinian cause. Thank you.
Our last panelist is Fatima Faid. Yes? Faid. I need to work on that, I'm sorry. She is leader, fractievoorzitter of the Haagse Stadspartij, a position that she has held since 2014. The Haagse Stadspartij is a progressive political party in the municipality of The Hague, committed to a whole range of progressive issues such as environmental sustainability, culture, unemployment, affordable childcare, affordable housing, and combating racism. We are really very honored that you've joined us for this discussion. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and I'm honored to be here with these great people. They are more intellectual than I am, and first of all, I must apologize of my poor English, because I'm not good in English. So help me if I cannot pronounce the things good or if you don't understand it. I wanted to talk about what can we do local? What can we do local in The Hague or in Amsterdam or whatever? I'm a politician, but I'm also an activist. And I think that is very important, the combination that you are activist and then you are also a politician, so that you can use your activism in the places where politics is made. For me, it's very important to learn. If I look at the Palestinian struggle, all these people, they have told what the question is, what the problem is. I'm not a Palestinian, so I keep myself a little bit low in that discussion, because I think it's very important that people who are suffering themselves, that they get the first place to talk about. But I think it's important to look what can we do local to help the Palestinian to make more awareness, because I think that is one of the problems. What I see in the Hague and in the municipality, it's very difficult to address Palestinian issues. Omar said it very good. Sometimes it's not politics, but sometimes it's politics. So if you want to address why are we making deals with Israeli companies, for example, then everyone is saying, yeah, but that's not the politics, we can do it here. That is the politic of the government, so we cannot do it. But when it was about the IRA declaration, then it was politics, what we can do here in Den Haag. So you see the difference. I think it's very important, and that is where I'm not completely agree with meneer Hamburger. I think it's very important to look like movements like Black Lives Matter. I'm also involved in the Black Lives Matter movement in Den Haag. And what I see, it's very important that we use the different struggles people have, that we use them to also in the Palestinian situation. What we see in the Black Lives Matter is that there are three different things what were important. That was the ideology. I think it's important to know, okay, colonialism is not something what is falling from the sky, but is also a construction of capitalism. I think that is very important to realize. We forget, because we are living here, in the Western world, we have freedom, we have food, all this kind of things, but we forget that we are living in a capitalism system. And I think it's very important that even the struggle movements must recognize that. Another thing what we can learn of Black Lives Matter is that resistance also must come from the streets. So awareness in the city about what is happening with the Palestinian people, that awareness is not enough. Let me say it. In Den Haag, 27% of the population under the 25 has a bicultural background. So that is a huge group of young people who are not aware. Of course, they know something, but all these stories, this a report of Amnesty about, okay, we are talking about apartheid. No one knows it, because we were talking just later. The Dutch media gives so little space to this report. So no one knows it. So I think what we learn from Black Lives Matter is get involved in the community of your city, bring a knowledge. Here are a lot of young people. I'm not so young anymore, but you are all very young, and I think that's important to do, because after 1 year or whatever, we are retiring, and then young people must make it. Like she, you know, she's very active. She has a fantastic speak today, and I think that is important to give people space. That is the other thing. And what we also can learn from Black Lives Matter is that they choose different oppressions, and they all, how do you say it in English? They try to get the different oppressions together in their own struggle. And that is, I think, very important, because now you see, for example, Extinction Rebellion, there's environment, there's a climate, it's a completely different thing like Black Lives Matter. But you see that, for example, Extinction Rebellion is also, when they talk about climate issues, when they do their activism, that they always also talk about the consequence for black people, and the other part of the world. And I think it's very important to get involved in your activism at much more groups than only your own group. Because otherwise we will stay small, and I think that is one of the problems, is that we stay small. And I think if we invite other people from other struggles, you know, you have a lot of activism in the Netherlands now. Many years it was completely dead, but now it starts, young people start to get involved in different activism, and I think that we must invite them, the other groups, and to tell them, okay, join us and let's see what we can do. So, okay, that is the activism part. The other part, the politician part, is it's very important that we as a political parties get people. Now we have the election, so you have 4 years to think about, do you want to get politic active? And because that is also important. It's important that in all these parties, that people are coming there and telling about the situation, telling about, you know, that you want to stand up for this thing. Because now it's a very small group of politicians who are addressing this thing sometimes, and then it fails, or something you have lucky, and then you can get other people. But I think it's also very important not to forget to address politics, to tell them, okay, do you know this? Do you know? Because I get always information from Palestine Committee or something. They call me, they send me an email, hey, this is going on, can you do something? Can you ask questions? And that's very important, because we also don't know everything, I can tell you. So we are, how do you say it in English? Afhankelijk? We are dependent of the information of the groups. So don't forget also to put your spears to the politicians. And I'm very curious, because there are a lot of young people, I'm very curious, what do you think, what is necessary to do local? If I'm telling, okay, learn from Black Lives Matter, make sure that all these activist groups are coming together in your issue. And of course, everyone's own issue is the most important, that is always, you know, but others can help. Others can be your supporter. They can be solidarity with you, you know, and then you can also do it by them. So then you get this, that you do things together, because at the end, we must live together, and the planet is only one. So later I want to hear from you. What do you think about it? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marta. I'm a Leiden University student, and I'm a member of Students for Palestine, The Hague. So I want to tell you a bit about the students' movement for Palestine in the Netherlands, and specifically Israeli Apartheid Week. The conference today is the closing event of Israeli Apartheid Week. During this week, student activist groups from big cities in the Netherlands, Groningen, Utrecht, Maastricht, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, The Hague, have organized events to draw attention to the apartheid regime Palestinians have to live under, but also to the resilience of the Palestinian people. Next to that, cultural events have been organized in which we celebrated the rich Palestinian culture. So, for example, food and dance. So we have faced quite some difficulties. I can speak for myself at Leiden. But this week has also been a big success, thanks to all the hard work of everyone in the movements. However, the end of Israeli Apartheid Week does not mean the end of our activism. We will continue until Palestine is free. And for that, we need you. I ask all students in the room that are interested to look up the local student activist group in your area and to sign up. You can follow Students for Palestine The Hague on Instagram at Students for Palestine. And for more information on Israeli Apartheid Week and the other cities, follow Israeli Apartheid Week NL on Instagram. It's also on screen. We made a petition in which we demand Dutch higher education institutions to initiate the academic boycott of Israeli academic institutions that are complicit in Israel's apartheid regime, and several of which even work closely together with the Israeli military. Please note that this is an institutional boycott and thus does not target individual Israeli academics or students. It would be great if you could all sign this petition. The QR code on the screen will direct you to the petition. So, there. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope to see you all soon again. Please join us.
So Marta has already begun the process of saying thank you, and there's so many people we really, really do want to thank. There are a few more I just want to add here. Well, certainly the student organizers of Israeli Apartheid Week. They have, as you've heard, faced significant struggles at certain universities in gaining space to exercise their academic freedom. There's also Dutch Scholars for Palestine, which I'm associated with, which has stood by these students in support and solidarity, academics from all these different institutions. Ismail Ziada, who I am very pleased to see has joined us here today. You've already clapped, so most of you actually know who he is. He has been, for those who don't, he has been fighting a legal case on behalf of his family against 2 Israeli military commanders here. The case is taking place here in the Netherlands. The case, which has been a great source of inspiration to members of Dutch Scholars for Palestine and student associations, was also the subject of a seminar last year here at ISS. The case will soon be heard in the Dutch Supreme Court. And if you want to know more about this case, including how you can support the case financially and otherwise, please come and speak with one of us, or indeed speak with Ismail. Ismail, it's such an honor that you've joined us. Thank you very much. I'm nearly finished. So the president and the board of Erasmus University Rotterdam, and I'm very proud of the fact that I can really thank them. They have been hugely supportive, as has been the faculty board of the International Institute of Social Studies. We're joined here by our dean, Inge Hutter, our rector of the Institute of Social Studies. They have really been quite lovely in supporting this event, and it's something we, again, cannot take for granted these days. The many staff and administrators who support these management structures, who steadfastly supported this event despite persistent attacks, very personal and nasty attacks against them. It's really important to know how difficult it is to organize an event like this and how important it is to have leadership from management. Please give them a very warm round of applause. So they provided this academic space for organizing these sensitive topics, and I'm very pleased to say that they will continue to do so. To you, in person and online, who have taken part in this wonderful discussion, please give yourself a round of applause. It's important to be part of these discussions. And then, of course, our keynote speaker, Omar Barghouti, and panelist Saleh Hijazi. Thank you so much for joining us from Ramallah. Jaap Hamburger from the Donna Abuelda. And Fatima Faid. Please continue to be kind to yourselves and to each other in this wonderful moment that we're now really able to interact with each other. It's been really wonderful interacting with you students and with you here today. Let's hope we have many more of these kind of events. Take care, stay safe, and free Palestine.